So on 786 in the 11th edition or 982 in the 10th edition, we get Dylan Thomas's villanelle, do not go gentle into that good night. And you've got a description or explanation, whatever term you want, of the villanelle form on the top of 786. And it's a pretty complex form to meet. So notice the form, 5 tercets, 3-line stanzas, and a concluding quatrain. First and third lines of the first stanza of the first tercet rhyme. These rhymes are then repeated in each subsequent tercet and in the final 2 lines of the quatrain. Also, line 1 reappears totally unchanged, again in line 6, 12, 18, and line 3 appears again totally unchanged as lines 9, 15, and 19. Dylan Thomas was a Welsh poet. You've got his dates there, 1914 to 1953. He died when he was 39 of alcoholism. Okay? He wrote a short story that's been made into a film. It's often played some cable channel during the Christmas season. I think you can find it on YouTube. A Child's Christmas in Wales. It's a really good story, and it's a really good film, too. I want to say Thomas won Nobel Prize for Literature posthumously, but I'm not positive about that. So do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So we get the initial stanza that sets up the entire rest of the poem. And what does that initial stanza tell us? What does the speaker in that stanza tell us? Do not go gentle into that good night. So notice night is good, and we're not talking about just the sun setting kind of night. Okay? Contrast this poem with John Donne's A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. Because we're told there, as virtuous men pass mildly away, and some say their souls go now, and some say nay, virtuous men pass silently. Here we're told, don't go gentle or silently into that night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day, or close of day. Old age. That's when people should die, right? Someone shouldn't die at 5 years old. Someone shouldn't die at 1 year old. Someone shouldn't die at 20 years old. You should live ripe old age and then kick the bucket. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. What does that mean? Not a $100,000 question. Go how? Die how? In a burst of flames? Fighting it. Kicking and screaming against it. Okay? Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked into no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. So, we now get, the first stanza talked about old age. It doesn't talk about old men. Second stanza, wise men. Wise men at their end know dark is right. What's meant by dark? Death. Wise men know what? What does Hamlet try to teach Horatio and Shakespeare try to teach us? The readiness is all. That is, we all die. You have to be. This isn't talking about the readiness, okay? But it is talking about you're wise if what? And notice, you don't have to be old to be wise in this context. If you know you're going to die. Okay? That is a mark of wisdom. I too will die. Cool. Wise men at their end know dark is right. Does that mean darkness, hell? No. Wise men know at their end they will die. That's it. It's very simplistic. Because their words had forked no lightning, they, and then we get the repetition of do not go gentle into that good night. Notice the do not go gentle into that good night is the cause. Excuse me. It's the effect, not the cause, of the previous line. Because the words had forked no lightning. What is he talking about? What does forked no lightning mean? Go out in an electrical storm. Might have one, I think it is tomorrow. If the lightning is just cloud lightning that you don't see, it doesn't apply. It doesn't work. Fork no lightning is talking about lightning bolts. Because what does every lightning bolt do? Is it a single stream of light? No, it does this and it goes all over. So, forked no lightning, the lightning bolt that kind of disperses into multiple bolts. Because their words had forked no lightning. So, when you experience lightning, think senses. What do you experience? I don't mean being hit by it. Out there, what do you experience? What do your senses receive? Light and
pain.
If you're too close, yes.
You can hear the thunder.
Thunder, light and sound. Okay? Because their words had forked no lightning. Words imply speech, sound from these wise men. What kind of words, speech do wise men give? Especially if those words don't fork any lightning. So we've already talked about lightning forks. Lightning gives off sound and gives off light. Okay, so we're talking about words though. How do words give off sound and light? Well, obvious sound. Light? What is Oedipus's problem throughout the play? Hubris, arrogance. Okay, but why?
He won't listen to Tiberius.
Okay. What's the difference between Oedipus and Tiresias? Tiresias is blind, but sees. Oedipus has sight, but is blind. Okay? Words had forked no lightning. They give off light, but the light doesn't do what? What's another word for light that we use to describe something in here? Illumination. It doesn't give, excuse me, it doesn't give any meaning. And the words give off sound, and the sound are like what? I've noticed this in people's facial expressions every now and then throughout the semester. I'm like the teacher in the old Charlie Brown cartoons. Wah, 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 wah. That's all you hear. Wah, 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 wah. Okay? No meaning. Or, as Shakespeare puts it in Hamlet, a sound in fury signifying nothing. Sound. Politicians. We have politicians who give off a lot of sound and generate a lot of light. Empty. Just vacuous. Because of that, these wise men, what? Do not go gentle into that good night. What do we say about someone who says these great, wonderful, wise words and then does the opposite? They're a hypocrite. Biblical example. Jesus tells his followers, do what the priests and scribes and Pharisees tell you to do. But don't do what they do. Because he's pointing out, they're the biggest hypocrites of all. Okay? So they're wise. Why? Because they know you got to die. Their words aren't. Their words are meaningless. They're empty. How do we know? Because they do not go gentle into that good night. They know they've got to die, and yet they kick and scream. I think I've mentioned in here before, when I teach my Harry Potter course, I say the novels are about one thing: how to die well. Not how to die. Everybody dies. It's how to die well. And there's a scene in one of the books where Harry finally comes to this realization of what his life is about. And he realizes there's two different ways to die. You can be, to use the language of the novel, you can be dragged kicking and screaming into the arena. And it's interesting, J.K. Rowling uses the language of the arena. Or you can walk in, head held high, chest out, shoulders braced, and say, "Come at me." The language, the image used is of early Christians in the Roman Colosseum. All kinds of written accounts surviving from that period. Of some people go in and they go in kicking and screaming. "No, I don't want to die. I don't want to." And others go in and say, "Come on, bring on the lions. Like tigers, bears, I don't care. Ready to die." So, for that second stanza, wise men. Third stanza, good men. We're going to see in stanzas 2 through 4 different kinds of men being described. So the third stanza, good men. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. So what are good men? We don't know. The poet doesn't tell us. But he does say, or the speaker does say, the last wave by. What's the last wave by? Is this like the king or queen or the pope, the Pope-mobile? This kind of wave? I'm saying goodbye to you now. Is it that? Or is it more of the military idea of a wave? Like when you have forces land, an amphibious assault, land on a beach, and they're followed by another landing wave and another wave. Why? Because they come in on waves. Like at D-Day or Okinawa in World War II. We haven't really had this happen in the last few decades, that Americans have been involved in wars. We didn't land in waves in Iraq. We moved up from Kuwait and such, and even they didn't land in waves on Kuwait. They're all flown in. I think it's this kind of imagery. Poems written, published, 1952. Dylan Thomas would have been very familiar with images of World War II and World War I. Okay? Where you have these waves coming. What often happens to the first few waves? They get slaughtered. So, good men, the last wave by. And that kind of implies also something about what's left. Not good men. They do what? They cry how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. So there we get a slight description of the good men. They're characterized by their frail deeds. Why are their deeds frail? If they're frail, they're what? Weak, powerless. Weak or powerless to do what? Make a change? We've got an upcoming presidential election. I'm going to use an example of frail deeds, so to speak. Running on the Republican side, Donald Trump, first one to announce. Vivek Ramaswamy, whatever his last name is, multi-millionaire, if not billionaire, hedge fund guy, really bright. Nikki Haley, former ambassador to the UN, governor of South Carolina. I don't think anybody else has actually announced yet. Mike Pence is probably going to get in. Former congressman, governor, vice president. DeSantis is the big question. Is he going to jump in, or is he going to play Hamlet and, not? To be or not to be, exactly. Okay? I just made, and then on the Democrat side, Joe Biden, Marianne Williamson, who I don't care what you think, she's a total loon, okay? Just total loon. And RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy Jr., his father was assassinated when he was challenged, when he entered the 1968 election, and just after Johnson, the sitting president, pulled out, okay? A lot of people say RFK is another total loon. I think he's loony about some stuff, but man, I really hope he stays in, okay? Because he's said some good things, in my opinion. So, look at the Republican side. Frail deeds. Let's take deeds out of it. Frail candidates. Does Nikki Haley have a snowball's chance in hell of getting the nomination? No. Vivek Ramas, whatever his last name is? No. Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina? No. Why? Because there's an 800-pound gorilla who's already been president, who's already said, hey, I don't have any problem upturning all these tables. Just total chaos. Bull in the china shop. Okay? Personally, I think Trump's policies were good. His presidency was a total cluster, you know what, okay? Policies good, shut his mouth, get off Twitter, that kind of stuff. Frail deeds. Why? These are deeds that have no effect. Nikki Haley was a great ambassador, I think one of the best, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan when he named a Democrat to be his ambassador to the UN, Jean Kirkpatrick. Why? Because she played with the big boys. She wasn't backing down from anybody. You pull a knife on her and she pulled out a gun. Okay? Tim Scott, nice guy. Really nice guy. He's got some great ideas. Police reform, man, if we'd listened to Tim Scott in 2016, we wouldn't have some of the problems we have. But, not going to happen. Nice guys, what? What's the rest of the phrase? Finish last. Their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. And the green bay is maritime language. It implies this kind of smooth, even water, no problems. In other words, they might have done something if it hadn't been for war. They might have done something if the world were not what it is. I mean, go back to Trump again for a minute. And how did Trump win in 2016? Who did he have to win against? The politics is unimportant. He had to beat 16 other Republicans. Almost every one of whom had a great resume. I mean, great resume. Most of them, not all of them. Okay? Their deeds were frail. Why? Because battle was enjoined. If Trump hadn't been there, Ted Cruz could have gotten it, Jeb Bush could have, I don't even remember who else ran, okay? Because their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, what do these good men now do? They rage against the dying of the light. It's like, I could have been a contender, and then you die. Or I could have, I wish I'd. These are people who they're on deathbed say what? If only I'd been a mean SOB, and taken that, whatever. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. What is that man who caught and sang the sun in flight? Remember the end of To His Coy Mistress? Where the speaker says, he's already made the pitch, let's have sex, because if you don't, you're going to be a virgin in death and the worms are going to do what I'd like to do. He then goes on and says, though we cannot make the sun stand still, what? Yet we will make him run. We're going to give the sun a run for his money. In other words, we're going to make the sun have to work really hard. Why? Because we're going to put out huge calories. Okay? And sex is what is being talked about here. Wild men catch and sang the sun in flight. That's kind of what's being implied. They try to freeze the sun by their wild living. And they learn too late. They grieved it on its way. How do you make the sun grieve? It's a big flaming ball of gas. Well, it's personified here. It gets anthropomorphized so that the sun has feelings. Like, look at them. They're trying to make me burn more energy so that... What do they realize? When it's too late. I can't make the sun stand still. No matter how busy I get, no matter how much I do, what? That sun just keeps turning. And therefore, they do not go gentle into that good night. Because notice, what does the good night imply? The sun's gone. Okay? Grave men. So, wise men, good men, wild men, now grave men. Near death, notice the pun. Because once you're in death, you're in the grave. What else does grave mean?
Morbid.
Could be serious, solemn. You're paying close attention. Grave men near death, like they're looking in the grave, who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. How do grave men see with blinding sight?
They see too much.
Keep going. I think that's possible. What do you often hear about people who have a quote-unquote near-death experience? What do they see? My life flashed before my eyes. In other words, like they see their whole life in a moment's time. The whole thing. I had a really bad accident once, early 20s, delivering pizzas on Lookout Mountain. Right front tire caught the edge of the road. The mountain was here. There's no curb or anything. Can't remember what it's called. Edge of the road, and it pulled me and then flipped. And my car just went whoosh, up in the air. Did this for about 30 feet in the air. I was going too fast. And then landed on the roof in the hood. I did have a seatbelt on. And when I was up in the air, I was like, I'm dead. And when it hit, I was like this, pushing against that steering wheel. Because that windshield came to like right here. And then slid for about 100 feet. I was going too fast. Okay? Yeah. They see with blinding sight. What do they see? Couple things. Maybe that insight into their life, and maybe what else? I'm about to die. None of us have that benefit, do we? Of when we're going to die. If you knew, literally, you knew exactly when you were going to die, what would you do? Let me rephrase that. If you knew that you were going to die in your 83rd year, on the 167th day, at the 9th hour, and 10th minute, and 4th second, what would you do? Now, party, right? I mean, if you know you're not gonna die to the end, then what do you do in your 83rd year on the day before that, whatever, or 2 days or 5 days or whatever? You set your affairs in order, whatever that means for you. In other words, you just put everything off and you enjoy life. But if you find out it's going to happen in 25 minutes, which means, sadly, while you're still, 25 minutes, while you're still sitting here, what do? See ya. Just leave it alone. Okay? That's that blinding sight. Who see with blinding sight, what do they see? Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors. How do meteors blaze? Shooting stars. Yeah, are they like looking at the sun? No, they're not, because you look at the sun and what happens? You become Tiresias. You go blind if you do it too long. But you can look at meteors all night long. They're not going to blind you. But you can look at them blaze and go out. And do what? Be happy. Gay there means be happy. Be full of joy. At the point of death, I can see flashes. And then die. And they die how? Rage against the dying of the light. Notice, meteors, it lights up for a second and then is gone. Okay? Look at a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse. We had one in 2017. There's going to be another one in the United States next year. Drive to St. Louis. You'll be in the total. Okay? Scientists, astrophysicists, all that kind of stuff will tell you, never look at a solar eclipse. It'll blind you. Not true. Okay? Don't look at a solar eclipse. But when the shadow of the moon totally obscures the sun, for the few seconds that it's there, you can look at that. Because the corona around the outside of the moon's shadow will not blind you. But once the moon just moves a little bit more, and it's no longer a corona and you're seeing the full light of the sun, that will blind you. So notice, you get this momentarily, I can see, and then you can't. Last stanza. And you, notice, not old age, not wise men, not good men, not wild men, not grave men, and you, my Father. And the speaker does what? Brings it home. Speaker makes it very personal. Not you and me, you, my friend. Not in you, my colleague. Not in you, my mentor. In you, my Father. There on the sad height. What's the sad height? Overlooking death. There's an Old Testament story. Someone who led his people to the promised land, but he didn't get it going himself. He got to go up on a high mountain, look at the promised land, overflowing with milk and honey and all that kind of stuff. But he didn't get to go in. Okay? There's another Old Testament passage, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. If it's a valley, then what must there be? Hilltops, mountains, overlooking it. My Father, there on the sad height, the precipice overlooking death. Curse me, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Why is he asking? I'm assuming the speaker is he. Why is he asking his father to bless or curse? Again, it's an Old Testament kind of image. The Old Testament patriarchs, just before they died, they had their children come before them. Abraham does it to Isaac. Isaac does it to Jacob and not Esau. Jacob then does it to his children, etc. And it's, give me your blessing. When Jacob does it to Isaac, he steals the blessing of the eldest son from his older brother. Esau then shows up and he goes, got nothing for you, son. Well, take that back. I got a curse. Your brother took the blessing, you get the curse. Notice, blessing, right hand, curse, sinister, left hand. Curse, what's the speaker saying? I don't give a rat's you know what. What you give me. Because cursing and blessing are where? They are the two extremes. Anything between blessing and give it to me. What's the speaker asking for? Something. Why? What's the setting, so to speak? The father's dying. Wake up, damn it! Say something. I literally think the father is comatose, out of it, unconscious. Say something. It would only be more sentimental if he said, in you, my daddy, to emphasize this connection. Notice, this isn't a uncaring necessarily child. Why? Maybe the father and the speaker have been distant. Say something to me. Give me something. I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Give me your last whatever. Ever seen the film? I didn't use this analogy in my first class. Did you ever see the film Signs? M. Night Shyamalan with Mel Gibson, Joaquin Phoenix. Mel Gibson's character is a priest, Anglican priest or Episcopal priest. His wife's dead. And we find out, as the film goes, why his wife's dead. She was hit by a car. Town drunk kind of a thing. And her very last words to her husband are, swing, Merrill, swing. Her husband's name isn't Merrill, that's his brother. And he's like, what? Why? It's just the synapses firing. His brother had been bound for the major leagues until he had an accident. Couldn't play baseball anymore. She remembered that. And there's a memory somewhere in her mind of him standing at the plate. And she's yelling, swing, Merrill, swing. And that's the thing that comes out in her final dying breath. I don't think that's what this guy wants. It's not what Mel Gibson's character wants either. But it figures into the denouement, the resolution of the film, which I won't talk about. Okay, go from there to 9:44. Death Be Not Proud, page 819. Another poem by Donne. We already read Valediction Forbidding Mourning. This poem has a date given of 1611 And on 1050, you were given the date 1610. My dissertation was Donne's Holy Sonnets. This is one of the Holy Sonnets. The other one is another one of the Holy Sonnets. Was an edition of them. That means I looked at all the manuscripts in person. That is, I went to the libraries that had them, of all of Donne's Holy Sonnets. Determined what's the proper order because there's multiple sequences, all that kind of stuff. There is nothing that dates this poem to 1611. There's nothing that dates the next one to 1610. I have no idea where they got those. They're not from Donne's biography, etc. Okay? The poems aren't first published until 1633, 2 years after Donne's death. Death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. Many of the manuscripts read death, comma. Death be not proud. Does not sound like you are addressing death. But when you put that comma after it, it turns death into what's called the vocative case from Latin. You're calling it out. Okay? Death, be not proud. Don't be so full of yourself. Even though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for you aren't. I don't know. Most people in our world would probably say, yeah, death's pretty mighty and dreadful. It's the number one thing people fear. Literally more than anything else, they don't want to die. Okay? For those whom thou thinkst thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. Really? So when my dad died in December of 2020, he's not really dead. And when my mom died in 2015, she's not really dead. Is that what he means? They die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. Donne's not walking around on the earth today. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. Rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. So from rest and sleep, we get what? Well, supposedly, much pleasure. How many of you wake up every morning just feeling totally new and refreshed? I got to wear Darth Vader's mask at night because if I don't, I will literally stop breathing. Really found out about over 10 years ago. Stop breathing for like over 100 times in a minute. Longest one was over 40 seconds. They woke me, this was during a sleep study. They woke me up, put a mask on me and said, if you were in a hospital, you'd have a tube down into your lungs at this point. You would be intubated because your brain's gonna die, all right? Why do I mention all that? Rest and sleep give much pleasure, or they should. How many of you have been awake before for 48 hours? What do you do when you wake up after the sleep after that? You probably go, I feel so much better. Even if that sleep was only 2 hours. I used to drive back and forth, San Jose, California, Silicon Valley, to Chattanooga, nonstop. Well, I mean, stop for gas, but I wouldn't stop to sleep. 2,500 miles, depending on how fast I was going, 36 to 39 hours. Okay? And I'd arrive all jacked up on no-dose and caffeine and, stuff like that. But the important part is, which but thy pictures be. Rest and sleep are images of death. What's meant by images? Remember when I drew Plato's cave, the allegory of the cave, when we were talking about Midsummer Night's Dream and shadows and all that kind of stuff? Rest and sleep are images, copies, poor imitations of death. And if we get much pleasure from rest and sleep, ergo, therefore, from death we'll get what? Even more pleasure. How so? Okay, but I mean, more down to earth. What happens when we've had enough rest and sleep? We, before we're alive, wake up. So from death, what? You said in heaven, we become more awake. Or maybe really awake. Then from thee much more must flow. Much more what? From death, much more pleasure must flow. And soon as our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls delivery. Our best men. That means good men, good people. As soon as they die, what do they get? I've literally, because I'm Christian, I've literally started saying almost every day, even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus. Why? Because even though I don't want to do it, I'm probably going to have this shoulder operated 4th time within the next year. And this time, it'll be what's called a reverse replacement, which means this cup right now, I would not be able to lift with this arm. Maximum 5 pounds. I used to press 360 5 years ago over my shoulders. And I can, just doing that hurts. Best men, they get what? Rest of their bones. What does Hamlet say in the to be or not to be speech? To die, to sleep. In soul's delivery. Thou art slave. How many of us think of death as a slave? Because every slave has what? A slave master. Somebody who goes, go on, get. Okay? Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men. Somebody robbing you at night. Somebody robbing a store. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. So, you're a slave of these things, and you dwell with these things. How many of you want to dwell with poison? Live with poison. War? Don't think so. Sickness. You want to live with AIDS? I don't think so. I love this line. And poppy or charms can make us sleep as well. What's he mean, poppy or charms? What do we get from poppies? Opium. That's what he's talking about. An overdose. Or maybe not an overdose. Maybe it's the dose you want to just kind of gently take you off. Morphine. Why do we have an opioid crisis in America? Is it because, rhetorical question, is it because doctors are overprescribing morphine or opioid pharmaceuticals? No, it is not. It's because of fentanyl and illegal opioids. Why do people want them? Rest of their bones and soul's delivery. Because what do they see around them? Hell. No hope, no future. Number one cause of death of teenagers. Suicide. Did I mention that the other day, or was it one of my other classes? Why? You would think teenagers, I remember being a teenager, I didn't like it. But you have what? Everything ahead of you. Why has it become so bleak? Popular charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Notice, stroke, that implies whack with a sword. How can popular charms make you sleep better than that? Just lie down and snort something, smoke something, swallow something, and drift gently off. One short sleep. Why swellest thou then? Why are you all puffed up? Why do you think you're so bad? One short sleep past, we wake eternally. About half the manuscripts read, one short sleep past, we live eternally. So the sleeping is therefore connected with one short death. And we what? Forever awake. There's that, go back to the allegory of the cave imagery. Okay? If we wake up from rest and sleep, which are images of death, and we wake up and think we're aware and think we're alive, what are we going to experience when we really wake up? Read C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle in the Chronicles of Narnia, and you get that image. And death shall be no more. Why? Paul says, 2 Corinthians I think it is, and the last enemy to be destroyed, is death. Death. Death, thou shalt die. How's that for a paradox? Death's going to die. Doesn't that kind of cancel out? Okay. Go from there to Batter My Heart, 1050. Another one of the holy sonnets. Dates given 1610. Again, I have no idea why. There's none of the manuscripts of Donne's poetry are dated. The only way we date them is by handwriting, because we can date, letter forms and that kind of stuff. Some of the poems do have a date in them. There's a poem, Good Friday, 1613, writing westward. So when that shows up in manuscript, it has that date. Doesn't mean the manuscript is from 1613. The poem is. The manuscript can be 1623. Theoretically, you could say it's 1609. If you knew that Good Friday, no, it can be from any date, but it, probably from 1630. Batter my heart. Batter my heart, three-person God, for you is yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. That I may rise and stand, overthrow me and bend your force, to break, blow, burn, and make me new. Is that how that poem should be read? No, it shouldn't. It should be read, see, we're not doing this other poem, are we? I don't think so. It should be read, batter my heart. There's another poem by another poet called George Herbert called The Caller. And the speaker says, I struck the board and cried. Aisle away. Struck the board means I banged on the table and said, I'm out of here. Batter my heart. Three-person God, Trinitarian God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. What does it mean, batter my heart? You don't know? Take a guess. Batter, not like cookie batter. No, not that. Or bread batter or cake batter. No. It means what? Beat the out of me. Beat my heart, God. Why? For you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. Each one of those verbs, knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend, comes from a biblical text. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, Jesus mildly says. And if anyone will let me in, I will come in and be with him. And we'll be happy and smiley faces. Okay? Breathe. Just before the crucifixion, Jesus, or just after actually, Jesus breathes on the apostles and says, receive the Holy Spirit. And then he tells them, stay in Jerusalem until the day of Pentecost. And then the Holy Spirit's really going to breathe on you. Okay? Shine. Old Testament prayer. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. Why? Because you don't want God to be looking at you like I'm looking at Test and go this. Because what does that mean? That's kind of the middle finger of God at you. God turns his back on you. There's no other way of putting it. You're screwed. for all eternity. Okay? And seek to mend. What does it mean to mend something? To fix it. We don't, 2023 America, we don't talk about mending very often, especially when it comes to clothing. Why? Because we become a consumerist throwaway society. If it's ripped, unless, you're talking about jeans you buy ripped, you have socks that get a hole in them, people no longer mend them, they just throw them away. Shirts, they no longer, why? Because you can go to Walmart or Target and buy something for $6, okay? Seek to mend. David prays in Psalm 20:21, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit in me. That's mending. He goes on later on and says, a broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. It's broken, so it's got to be fixed. That I may rise and stand, paradox, overthrow me. What does it mean to be overthrown? Knocked down. So I can get up and stand, knock me down. What? And bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. That I may rise. Rise how? On, the implication is, I'm not saying this is literally it, on my own power. God's got to do what? Because if I'm rising on my own power, what am I showing? My independence, my arrogance, my lack of humility, and God does what? Go away. Teaches one a lesson. What comes before a fall, according to the Psalms and Proverbs? Pride. You get all full of, think Oedipus. You get all full of yourself, and what is going to happen? We could think politicians, we could think actors, whatever. You fall. So the next set of images. Break, blow, burn, and make me new. That is something that people used to do all the time. We don't do it in 2023 metropolitan America. Why? Because we go down to Publix and Kroger and buy our bread or flour. It's an image of taking wheat or some kind of grain in its husk, doing this, breaking the husk, blowing the husk away, keeping the kernel here. What do you do with the husk once you take it away? You burn it because it's no good. It's not needed for anything. And what do you do with that kernel, which is a seed, actually? Well, if you're going to make flour, you grind it up. But what if you want to make more of it? You take that seed, which is dead, not mostly dead, dead. Miracle Max isn't going to bring this alive. And you put it in the ground. And out of the dead seed, new life emerges. Right? We saw that in Ode to the West Wind. Scatter the leaves and seeds. Winter comes. And oh, the spring comes again. And make me new. There's the rebirth. I'm like a usurped town to another due. I labor to admit you, but owe to no end. Like a usurped town, but I'm owed to another. What's the town usurped by? A rival power. And I try to let you in. This is the doorway that lets you in. And how does he try to let him in? What am I doing wrong? I'm pulling on the door. Gary Larson had a cartoon years ago. Door, handle, person standing at it. Midvale School for the Gifted. Very bright people. And the kid's sitting there pulling on the door handle. Okay? I labor to admit you. I want you to come in, but to no end. That is, to no purpose, to no success, to no finality. Why? Reason your viceroy in me. What's a viceroy? The roy means king. Vice king, like vice president. What's the purpose of the vice president? To stay breathing in case the president dies. That's it. The Constitution gives no authority, no powers to the vice president. It is merely occupy this chair in case the president dies. And if the president dies, you move to the big chair. And somebody else sits in that chair. Reason is captive, and it should defend me. Why is it captive? Remember when I talked about Calvinism and had tulip? And the first T, total depravity. Even the mind is captive. Even our logic and reason is flawed. And it proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and I really, really, really love you, and I want you to love me back. But I'm betrothed unto your enemy. So I love you, but I'm engaged to this one. Okay, God, so here's what you got to do. You, God, have to divorce me. That is, not you turn your back on me, but you, God, separate me from the one I'm captive by or married to. Divorce me, untie, or break that knot again. Untie the bond or break that knot. Another one of his poems, Donne talks about the subtle knot that makes us man. The thing that links soul and body. Untie it. Kill me. Take me to you, imprison me. I know I'm kind of a little late. For I accept you enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste except you ravish me. What does that mean, nor ever chaste except you ravish me? What's chaste? Pure. What's ravish? Two meanings. One, rape. I can't be pure unless you rape me. What does that mean? Take me totally, completely. I'm impure. What is God? God is holy. What that really means is totally other. God is not anything we think God is. Why? Because all of our terms come from here. Totally other. I can't be pure unless you totally other me. What's the other meaning for ravish? Take me away. Remove me. You want me, God? You want me to be pure? Even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus. That's what it means. Okay, I'll put up a video or two for the remaining poems. I'm going to put up the exam today. It's due Monday night by 11:59. Only covers poetry, except for extra credit. Extra credit, we'll go back to the beginning. All right. Thank you for showing up. You've heard a few who have always shown up.